Listeners everywhere, welcome to the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan, the weekly fix for your screen addiction and a trusted source for discussion of all things film and television. Please keep in mind that for the purposes of this podcast, Joel and Ryan are not acting as journalists, but rather fellow moving picture enthusiasts. All of their opinions should be taken as such. Also, please be warned that while Joel and Ryan may seem like petulant children, they are, in fact, adults who may occasionally use adult language. While they promise to bleep out all the worst words, it's a good bet you will still understand what they were saying. And now, with no further ado, here's Joel and Ryan.
Hello, and welcome to the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan. I am Joel.
And I'm Ryan.
And I'm Rob.
And Rob is joining us. Woohoo! Viva la Rob! Yay! Great to have you, Rob. How you been?
I was sure the actual applause was going to come there.
Yeah. I didn't find it.
What a terrible audience. You're not supposed to say
Yeah.
They really missed their cue on that one.
They did. They really missed the cue on that one. It's good to see you, Rob. How you been?
Pretty good. Pretty good.
Thanks for inviting us into this little corner of your mind for this episode. Today, we are going to be discussing this little-known filmmaker, this young upstart of his day, a gentleman by the name of Alfred Hitchcock. Heard of him? I think you have. So today we are going to be talking about the early period of Alfred Hitchcock. Should we just get into it? Should we just jump right into it? Do we have anything else to talk about? Any business? Do we need to go over the previous show's notes? Anybody?
Oh, I have a note.
Oh, okay.
Back in I want to say the third episode of the 1982 thing, in place of Still of the Night, I recommended a different Alfred Hitchcock ripoff by a better filmmaker, Jonathan Demme, and I couldn't think of the name, and then we obviously had to move on because I may never thought of the name. The name is The Last Embrace.
The Last Embrace. There it is, folks.
And as far as since we're talking Hitchcock, and I was talking Hitchcock ripoffs, Last Embrace, I believe, is from like 79 or something. So it's not from 82, so don't look for it that way. But Jonathan Demme, Roy Scheider, Janet Margolin, it's not great, but most Hitchcock ripoffs aren't. I still think it's pretty great, and it's certainly much faster moving and more exciting than Still of the Night, which is it's not bad, but kind of a bit staid.
Harry breaks down and loses his job after his wife is assassinated. Could it be his turn next? That's The Last Embrace right there.
That's The Last Embrace for you, baby.
All right. Well, here we go, gang. Let's get into a little bit of Alfred Hitchcock. Okay, so that's what we're going to be talking about today. We have 6 films that are like a highlight. These are highlights of his British era, the British period of Hitchcock films. And yeah, so we're going to get going on that. We're going to start off with a little movie called Lodger, a story of the London fog.
Well, before we jump right into the film, there's probably just a little bit of background that makes sense too.
Yeah, I guess we should talk a little bit about what we mean by the British period and all that other fun stuff.
Yeah, why Hitchcock, Rob? What's so great about him? I've never seen only a couple of his movies. They're not that great.
Oh no, the show's about to go downhill. For me, he's one of my favorite directors, and I fell in love with him, at I guess age 11, if not before. There is a group of 5 films called the Forbidden Five that Hitchcock owned outright. 8 years after they were put out, the rights reverted wholly to him, and he kept them under lock and key and wouldn't let them be seen. And there were some of the big ones: Vertigo, Rear Window, Marnie, The Birds, and The Trouble with Harry, I believe. No, Rope. Rope is in there. So one of those isn't. The Birds maybe isn't. I don't know. Doesn't matter. He held those back, and until his death in 1980, nobody could see them. They hadn't been seen for like 20 years. And so it took about 3 years to negotiate with his estate for those films to be re-released. And then they popped up, I believe it was on HBO, with a little documentary about it, and I just got fascinated by them. And I watched
good group
those
to
films.
Start with, right? If you're gonna,
right.
If you want to be wowed by them, I mean, that's Vertigo in particular.
Yeah, and I think, it's hard to remember that far back. I'd have been 11 in 1983, but I'm pretty sure I had seen several of his earlier films. One of the films we're going to be talking about, the 39 Steps, was one of the first VHS tapes we had when I was a kid. 1 year for Christmas, our parents got us a VHS deck and a bunch of movies. And of course, these were all the public domain or cheap rip-off movies that you could get or whatever. And the 39 Steps was among them.
Because rental movies cost $89 or whatever to buy from the studios, because all the rental stores were paying top dollar for them. And it wasn't imagined even then by the studios that people would want to have these in their homes necessarily. They certainly imagined us wanting to tape stuff off of TV and everything, but that we would actually buy a movie with a cover in a box or whatever in a clamshell was still but a dream. People had to start doing that before the studios could see that there was a market for any of it.
So I became a Hitchcock fan, I believe, earlier than 11 years old, because I also am pretty certain that North by Northwest was one of my earliest favorite films, and that would have been long before 1983 that I would have determined a favorite film. So I've been a fan of his. Through my father, I always went back, watch black and white movies. That was never a barrier for me. And I was always surprised at the people who, even when I got to college, like, why would I watch that? It's black and white. Why would you not? What if it's a good movie? So certain barriers that other people had, I didn't have. So that's why I'm a big Hitchcock fan. When I heard that you guys haven't seen very many of those films, that became a topic that, hey, we could do that. And you know what? He's one of those directors that you look through his filmography, and if you've seen them all, which I've seen almost all of them, you make your first swipe through what are the masterpieces, and you come up with about 12 to 15 titles. And then you go, okay, what are great films, but not quite a masterpiece? Well, there's another 12. Okay, what are really good movies, but maybe not great movies? And you got another 10. And, it's just, it's a filmography that's just packed with films that you try and come up with your top 10, and it's always got 13 in it. And you're like, but all these other films should be on this list. Okay, I'll make it 20. And
when we agreed to do the show, we thought, because we could have started anywhere. We could have started with the purple titles, but it made more sense the way we operate around here to just start back basically at the beginning.
Yep. So this will be covering his British period before he's lured away to Hollywood. And the 6 films we chose to focus on are really, they're sort of the blueprint. They're sort of the films that match what we think of when we think of a Hitchcock film.
That show the way to the golden age of Hitchcock.
Basically. Exactly. So he began in films in 1919 as he designed title cards. He wrote. He did assistant directing. He did production design. He was a big fan of German Expressionist film, and you can really see that when we get into his first film that we're talking about, which is The Lodger. So if you want to cue up the sort of IMDb synopsis of that.
Yeah, real quick though. I mean, I've been trying to look here, and you can always say, we'll talk about it on another show. But why did he sit on those films? Why did he not want them released? Why did he not want them?
He wanted them to be an investment for his family down the road. And it was really almost like fortune telling that he knew that there was value in those films. In fact, Jimmy Stewart wanted to use a clip from Vertigo for his, I think it was his AFI Lifetime Achievement Award, and he couldn't get permission to do it. So, it was thinking ahead. And I mean, it was a crazy deal that the studio struck with him. I think it was Universal Studios who
I'm sure you're right.
Yeah. After 8 years, we've had a chance to re-release it a couple of times. There's no money to be made on it. Sure, if that's what you need to sign on with us, sure, you can have them. And now, I mean, when they were released theatrically in like 82 and 83, they made big money at the box office.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
All right, so let's go back into. I almost want to hit the Dr. Clocks. Mind Scrabula, Tongorium Mind Scrabula clip, but we're going to go back in time to 1927 to The Lodger, a story of the London fog, where a landlady suspects that her new lodger is the madman killing women in London. The Avenger.
Yep.
But not that Avenger.
So,
not the Avengers.
Right.
Basically, so in this particular group of super old movies, this is the super oldest.
Yes.
And it has the oldest feel to it. It has Ivor Novello is this, I guess not really the star of it. He kind of is.
He is.
He was the star that was in the movie at the time.
Right.
And he has a very, like, I don't know what to say it. He has a very Valentino-esque style of silent movie acting. Got all the guys have super heavy eye makeup, and they all kind of have this. It's weird, but one of the things I hate about silent movies, there's a lot of things I really, really like about it, but one of the things I hate about it is how when people aren't talking, they're talking with their movements and stuff, and then I don't like that. There's not a lot of this. Mostly when they're talking, they're just talking to each other. And I would say more than half the time in The Lodger, you're not even, it's not even translated for you. Like you can follow it. Right. I think one of the things that happened with The Lodger, and I only got this from reading trivia after I was done watching it and watching some of the special material that are associated with it. But one of the things that happened was somebody was come in to kind of take a go at it for the studio to make it a little bit tighter of a film. And one of the things he did was get rid of a bunch of the dialogue cards that wasn't needed. And whoever that guy was, I can't remember. We know who he was, but it's not a mystery. But he did us a favor there, I think, because you really only need translated for you what you need translated. Sometimes you do need that. But good silent films and just good visual storytelling in general, you don't need a lot of that. We talked about the last time we were together, or maybe it was the last time we were with Michael, but either way, we talked about the scene where there's a scene happening and there's people talking to one another and we know what they're saying. And we think probably there was dialogue that was meant to be put in there.
From The Verdict. Yeah.
Yeah. From The Verdict. That's right. Yep. And it just, when you see it and you're like, man, it's all there. This doesn't need anything else. In fact, this would be diminished with an extra thing.
Right.
That was one of the things I super liked about The Lodger. But I don't like the weepy string, this kind of acting thing. Like, I've never liked that. So that was a bit of an impediment. But man, Rob, there were some things in this that just knocked my socks off. My first thing I noticed where I was like, oh, that's so cool is just all of his weird crossfades and montages and stuff. And like that, I don't know how cool that was then. I suspect it was super cool.
Yeah.
It's the fact that it's still cool just shows you that, you know, even something that was innovative that we've seen 100 times, if you do it right in the moment, is still cool. It lasts forever. That shot of the back of the newspaper delivery truck with the guys inside those weird little windows where their heads are doing this because of the way the truck is moving. And it looks like eyeballs, irises moving together in eye holes in the back of the truck. Of course, and these are the news delivery people of the day, the sensational people in that idea juxtaposed with eyeballs sort of reading the headlines. I mean, my God.
Yeah. I love the way the film opens, even the title cards. It does this sort of fan in on this image of the man. And really that's going to be the theme of this film, is the world closing in on who will turn out to be the wrong man.
Yeah.
Which is going to be a theme that we're going to see a lot of.
Spoiler alert
films.
For the larger story of the London film.
Yeah. But then it opens
probably nobody listening to this has actually seen.
Right.
And now you know that the guy isn't the real killer. Although, if you give it an ounce of thought at the beginning of the movie, how could he be? Otherwise, the whole thing is just, every scene has a sense of inevitability to it, right? Or an obviousness to it. If you really do kick back, right? Remember, Rob and I just watched a movie where I was like, well, it's got to be such and such. I mean, it just has to be. And it wasn't because we were given any evidence that it was. It was because there isn't anybody else.
Right.
This film hasn't given us red herrings that are worthy of coming back into the movie and being the bad guy or being the killer. It can only be one person. And in this case, it's like, boy, if this really is the person, then all this histrionics are just leading to some kind of weird payoff. If you've seen enough movies, we're not really spoiling this for you, I'll just say. But
yeah. And
he is creepy, and he's super creepy. He's a super creep.
He is. It's shot that way to make you believe that he is that, and then it's slowly revealed that it isn't. And by the end, when you know for sure it isn't, you're relieved because you've come around from being super creepy to being somebody that you understand, who's out there trying to catch the Avenger, because okay, let's not do any more spoilers, but he has a reason for trying to catch the Avenger.
Yeah, he's on the hunt, and that's how he gets wrapped up in the lives of all these people.
Yeah.
There's but getting back to it, there really is there really is a lot of time spent with the people of the press.
Right.
And how they are giddy and excited like we are from watching the movie, presumably. Hitchcock was one of the first filmmakers, maybe one of the first English language filmmakers, we'll say, who you felt his presence in the thing.
Yeah.
Like he is a silent narrator who has a point of view on what you're seeing, feeling, and this is something that you almost never see today. In fact, if you do get a sense of it, it's jarring and unnatural and horrible. But in the time, it was really, really neat. It was the storyteller, the guy behind the camera. Like, when do we trust him, and why don't we? And what's an effective use of those things? You know what I mean?
Yep.
And I think that's really neat. And the metaphor for that in the film is the news business and how blood makes the print, and the print, shares the grisly details with the people, and how that we and they gobble that up. And he doesn't judge them so much as we're forced to ask ourselves the question: what is it about us that makes us want to get into these serial killings and stuff? And I think that's interesting too.
He also opens the film with all these different media sources disseminating the information, and it's a way of saying, let's not just put up a bunch of title cards that explain what's going on, or have two people talking. We're giving out this information in a visual way. Sure, there's text involved, but Hitchcock was a real believer in pure cinema, which is visual storytelling.
Right.
And I think it goes to show that he had a knack for that even early on, with the fact that they could take out title cards because they didn't matter.
Yeah.
Because he was getting the story across visually.
Right.
And he does a lot of really interesting visual things here. I love we see the killer upstairs pacing because
through a transparent ceiling.
Yeah, everybody looks up. There's a glass ceiling, which isn't real. It's just a visual to show us what's happening. We see the
not an actual glass ceiling, but we see through the floor to the lodger pacing back and forth as they're listening to it, and they're and we are affected by it. And I don't think there'd been anything like that in a movie up until that point.
And we have another situation where the detective is staring down at the footprint, and in it we see little bits of information, and then we cut to him. And what we understand from the way that's edited together is that this is what he's thinking, and he is putting some things together and coming to a conclusion. And it's interesting the way he visually gets across what this character is thinking without him having to say, I wonder, and giving us a title card.
Yeah, no, totally. That sort of illusionary stuff. And it's another one of, it's like Hitchcock's sort of impossible architecture, where the footprint of the house doesn't really make sense, and that nothing really fits together right. Like, that's part of it is he's not really concerned with that. He's kind of only concerned with one shot at a time. But part of it is he enjoys, I think, and I can't read his mind, but I think he clearly enjoys people being bothered. First of all, noticing, and then either being upset with it or being at peace with it. Either way, he enjoys the reaction to it. And I think he enjoys the disorientation that it either consciously or subconsciously creates in the viewer. There's a super famous staircase shot in this. And of course, I know enough about Hitch to know that the staircases, the staircases throughout the canon is, they're crucial visual things. This is a combo staircase prison bar motif that we have. And it's also just this incredibly composed shot from outside the staircase through the rail, the handrail, to the stairs, and then to a person at the bottom of the stairs who appears briefly, hits his mark, and then moves on. But it's balletic and really cool. And that's the thing when they talk about Hitchcock's visual style and how his films are full of that. It's kind of funny because out of all these movies, and they're all really great looking, no doubt, especially for films of the era, but they're just visually really compelling. This was the one that is just loaded with tricks and gimmicks and fun. And that was great because this is the one I most needed to sort of really keep my attention. It was the longest one. It was silent, which I get really impatient with. Just as a viewer, I don't mind black and white. I never have, but I don't mind visual storytelling. Like, I don't mind when people shut up and you experience a story, or if the story is about like a tiger or something and it never talks to me. Like, I can deal with that. I have trouble with that. People are talking, people are sharing lunch together, whatever they're doing, and we're not hearing them, and we're having to interject the meaning of stuff. I always find that frustrating. But the relationships here are interesting too, Rob. We've got to talk about what essentially ends up being a love triangle. You've got the daughter of the folks who run this boarding house. A police detective who's just been assigned to the very exciting what do they call the guy? The
Avenger, right?
The Avenger.
Yeah, the Avenger.
Jeez, what a dumb name. But anyway, it's basically inspired by the Ripper murders, more or less. He's not killing prostitutes necessarily, but he is killing all blondes, right?
Yes. And there's a couple of things.
That figures, by the way.
Hitchcock has a couple of obsessions or a couple of themes that he comes back to. One is the wrong man. And I think that comes from when he was a young boy, his father sent him to the police station with a note. And he gave the note to the policeman, and they brought him in and locked him in a cell for 5 minutes. Then when came back in 5 minutes, let him out, and said, "That's what we do to naughty boys." And
Jesus.
from that time on, he is terrified by police. And I think that's where that wrong man, he knows he's never going to do anything wrong because he's terrified of police. He didn't drive because he was afraid of getting a parking ticket. And I can relate.
Thanks, Dad.
Like, one of my
lifetime
biggest
of psychosis.
One of my biggest fears is being arrested for something I didn't do and going to prison. It's just it just terrifies me. I don't jaywalk for that very reason. I don't like to be confronted with the police.
I've been arrested a couple times for things I actually did, so you get over that.
You get
quick.
over it, huh?
Well, maybe not.
That is a.
My dad never taught me that very important lesson when I was a kid by sending me down to the local precinct with a note telling them to lock me up in the jail cell. So I turned out to be a bit of a dick.
So I mean, that is a theme that's going to come up over and over and over again assuming that we continue with shows moving throughout his career.
We'll see what kind of fan mail we get over this show.
Yeah. And the other thing is he has a big obsession with blondes.
Yeah, clearly. And
so it's interesting and telling so early in his career that golden curls, that's what the Avenger goes after, women with golden hair, so blondes, basically. So it's telling that even then we have this.
But the cop in this, her suitor and the guy who's just been assigned to the case, he's about as nice a guy as there is, right?
Yeah, but he does make a mistake. And he does arrest the wrong man.
He does.
Yep.
But come on. I mean, the evidence leads right to the guy, basically. What can you do? Plus, the guy's super suspicious. If he didn't want to be considered the wrong man, why is he walking around with a cover over his face and acting so creepy all the time?
Yeah.
And hiding a concealed weapon, which is a really unusual thing to be walking around with, especially at this period in England. And all the other creepy ass things that he does in the movie.
I think, basically this is an adaptation of a novel. And in the novel, the lodger is the killer. And of course, the studio wouldn't let Ivor Novello be the killer, so that had to be changed.
In a way, I think that's a case of studio interference making the movie more interesting, actually. Because they didn't say you need to do this and you need to do that. They just said, you can have Ivor, but he can't be a guy who's going around murdering blondes. He's a big star for us.
Yep.
Do something different.
Yeah, and Hitch had the same problem later in Hollywood. He wanted Cary Grant to turn out to be the bad guy in Suspicion, and was not allowed to do that.
Right.
So
wasn't allowed to shoot the ending of the original novel of his Oscar-winning Rebecca either, because it's too, I don't know what, it's too complicated, I guess, for them to be able to handle. They need crime, punishment.
Right.
Punishment. And there can't be any sympathy or gradation between the two things, which sucks. But here he sort of has his cake and eat it too, because without totally spoiling it, while we've definitely spoiled that Novello is not the killer, but that's hard to talk about this movie in any sort of depth without doing that. But we never engage with or come to witness or really see the actual killer as a character.
Right.
And by leaving him out and just dealing with him forensically, you really do have you're forced to take those crimes for granted as what they are, and you're forced to deal with this. I think it's basically primarily a trio, and not so much what their crimes are, but what their sins against each other are.
Yeah.
When they lose faith or when they lose trust in each other, when like you say, when the cop goes, I think he does more than that, because I think it's reasonable for him to suspect our hero, and you know what I mean? I think that's not a crime he commits against the story so much as he just doesn't deal honestly or respectfully with the girl, where Lodger Novello's character may be slow to reveal himself, but he does deal with her honestly, emotionally, with emotional honesty and with actual truthfulness. And I think that's why she falls for him and moves away from her better, more convenient and more compatible match that the movie sets up for her.
Yep. And real quick, early on before, and then we should move on to the next film, I think. Alma Revelle, who is Mrs. Hitchcock, his wife, they met making films. She's credited on this film as assistant director, and basically that is a role that she had for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, credited or not.
Uncredited. Yeah. But nothing got made without Alma's approval.
Yeah, and her once over and her asking him the big questions that he had to answer before he would spend however much time of his life, combating some particular thing. Right. I know that from watching all the movies that are about him.
About him, sure.
Yeah, not so much the movies of himself, but.
Yep. Hitch was big into developing the scripts. This came much later, where he got a little more intense about that. But all of that, he said he went to a very strict Jesuit school. Growing up, his parents were Roman Catholic, thus the guilt and all those things being deeply embedded in his persona. And he said that the Jesuits taught him three things: organization, control, and analysis. And you can see all of those throughout his career as just keystones of his style, his work, his way of working.
Well, and just visually stunning. The use of the mirrors, the way he puts the camera in impossible places. Typically, I don't like that, but in this film, it really made the thing feel fresh. It's only the fourth silent movie I've ever seen, sixth if you count The Artist and Blankviev's, which I don't really count since they were silent movies of the modern era that comment on silent movies. And it was a fun time at the movies. Like it was exciting and fun, even though the really broad theatrical acting styles do great. They just at a 2-hour time period, even in the best of these, I've always just gotten sick of that. But I really, really liked the visual style here. It was just dynamite. The weird stuff with the art in the room, and it's just packed with all this interesting metaphorical stuff that you aren't allowed to think about for very long before you kind of are on to the next thing.
Right.
But I liked that it had all that in it, that it wasn't just a plot driven film, even though it was primarily, it still had all this ancillary things that I'm still sort of thinking about and dealing with. That made it fun.
So
and the tinting was really, really well thought out.
Yeah.
As a side thing, we won't talk about a lot of silent films, but this is a film that's, for a silent film, it's actually rather colorful. It's not it's not black and white. It's like a lot of silent films of the era. It's got the scenes are like tinted in these colors. They're amber, they're pink, or they're blue or purple. But that's always been like, oh, it's blue because it's night or whatever. Like, it's just sort of obvious. It's much more subtle here. Obviously, whoever did it, whether it was Hitchcock or somebody else, it's hard to know for sure who was in charge of that process or who made those decisions. It's natural and it serves the film in a way. Because I'd almost always rather just be like, just black and white. We don't need the tints or whatever. Like in Phantom of the Opera is the one I'm thinking of, where even though Phantom of the Opera is great, those tinted scenes are just like.
Yeah, and the hand
like a thing. Yeah. It's like a thing you have to get past to enjoy the movie. And in this, they did it exactly as much, but just much, much better.
Yeah,
I thought.
Well, this is near the end of the silent period, so
they're getting good at it. Basically.
Yeah,
exactly.
I mean, Ivor Novello reprised his role for a sound adaptation of this movie a few years later in 1932, called The Phantom Fiend. And Hitchcock was asked to direct it, but he declined. Instead, Morris L.V. directed.
There's a Merle Oberon version of the same story, right? in the 40s sometime.
Yeah, and in that one, he actually, if I recall correctly, I have seen
That's more faithful to the book without spoiling it.
And to put a bow on this, going back to the beginning of the discussion, talking about how a producer came in and said, we got to trim this movie up and everything, getting rid of all those title cards. It was a critic named Ivor Montague that came in and did that. And to me, the big takeaway is for some reason in this period of time in England, there were two guys named Ivor.
Yeah.
So,
Ivor Powell, it was the associate producer, Alien and Blade Runner. We didn't mention him in the last 2 weeks' shows, but everybody loves Ivor. It just shows you.
God, that's a name that's got to make a comeback, don't you think?
Yeah.
All right. Let's move on to the man.
We'll have one in between. We need to mention Blackmail from 1929. It's the first British sound film and directed.
And it was directed by.
Yep. And
it's considered pretty good, but not good enough to make our big six for this period.
Right. It began production as a silent film, and then the studio decided they wanted to, use sound, and their idea was to do the final two reels in sound, which Hitchcock thought was ludicrous. So he sort of secretly refilmed a lot of the film with sound. And so the film was released in both a silent and a sound version. I have them on Blu-ray, and a few years ago, the British Film Institute instigated Save the Hitchcock 9, which is his silent films are extant. And they did a beautiful restoration of the silent version of Blackmail, but nobody's done a very good restoration on the sound version. So I did rewatch the sound version in preparation for this, just so that we could talk about it very briefly. And the silent version looks beautiful. The sound one, it's just like, it's not terrible. But it doesn't look.
It shows you one thing had been planned out, mapped out, and the other thing, while adequate, was done on the fly. And of course, it's not going to be as lyrical or as makes sense.
But there are a couple great things in that film, and one is an important thing. It's the first time that Hitch uses a landmark as a setting in his film. And in this case, it's the British Museum. There's a chase at the end through the British Museum. And that is a thing that we're going to see come up over and over again with Hitchcock's films, all the way to, North by Northwest, where we're on Mount Rushmore. He's going to utilize that idea of taking this place that you think of as safe, secure, you do not associate with a danger or anything like that, and putting those things in there. So really, that's all there's to say about Blackmail. It's fine, but I think all of the other films on here are entertaining to some extent, as well as showing the progression of Hitchcock and his style. And Blackmail is important because of because it's the first sound British film. And it does have some neat things in it, but it's not necessarily worth you guys taking the time to try and.
Well, and it's neither here nor there. That's the tragedy of it. It two films, and neither one is exactly what it could have been at its best.
Right.
That's typically what happens when the things diverge like that. You don't, and neither one of them. First of all, you put them in competition with each other. The only way to talk about a movie like Blackmail now is which one do you prefer and why? Because there's two versions. With one version, you just deal with it on its own terms. Every time a fork in the road comes for a movie like that, it just creates a debate, and that comes first every time, and that's kind of a shame too.
So, Joel.
Yeah, the man who knew too much. Let's get some.
You say that again.
Hey, I bit my tongue. I'm working on it. The Man Who Knew Too Much. I was excited, and also I was very excited to usher in the Nova Pilbeam section of our discussion.
Yeah. I'm a big Nova Pilbeam fan now.
So an ordinary British couple vacationing in Switzerland suddenly find themselves embroiled in a case of international intrigue when their daughter is kidnapped by spies plotting a political assassination.
There you go. And this was a much-needed success for Hitchcock. The Lodger had been a huge success, and then he really sort of had a bit of a slump in there. He wasn't aware of that, but critics and studio heads were, and this one sort of really got him back on top. This and then this was a success, and then the next one is the 39 Steps, I believe, and that was a huge hit, not just in Great Britain but in the U.S. as well.
Man Who Knew Too Much, usually when you drop that name, first of all, that's a sort of loaded name that has several variations throughout the movies that have been toyed around with. Secondly, this isn't even the most famous version of The Man Who Knew Too Much by Alfred Hitchcock. It's the earliest version, but there's another one, which we don't have to get into, but that comes later with this exact same title. It's somewhat parallel premise, but really not the same movie at all. And other than that idea, the man who knew too much, the guy who's stuck with this information and is painted into a corner in a way that they can't really share it and yet still have a very driving need within them to solve what their own dilemma is in the story, and that's fun. Those early scenes when we see them, but it's not him, which is interesting. It's his wife, who's part of a clay pigeon shooting competition, skeet shooting.
Yeah.
And she ends up losing to this guy, and everybody has champagne and stuff. It's very weird. There's this weird part where somebody skis down like almost into the crowd or whatever. And then the high society folks are all at a dinner that night, which is dancing and like a pig with its full face in it that they're eating, and all that stuff that you see that like I don't experience very much in actual life, but it's fun. And that scene is really fun. Like the dad and the daughter playing tricks and stuff. There's a scene where somebody wearing a sweater, or what are they wearing, where they take their little string.
It's the knitting that her mother has been working on. He takes the string and ties it around.
He ties the knitting to the thing. And so that he's moving around throughout this ballroom or whatever, and everybody's getting tangled in this yarn.
And what that early section does, all those things you're mentioning, is it establishes this really close and really charming relationship between the dad, the mom, and the child. That they are a close-knit group, that they joke around together, and thus it's going to make the situation that comes up all the more heartbreaking. And
you feel the filmmaker commenting on what he thinks is sort of an ideal family unit. All three of them are very smart. The daughter is plucky and annoying as far as kids go, but she also asks interesting questions and is engaged with what's going on around her. Like, there's just a lot to like about this group. And every little thing here that they do, like this real economy of storytelling, at least thematically in the early scenes. It's not just, you're right. Plan A is introduce the family, like them because they're about to be plunged into this thing. But plan B is set up everything that we're going to see later. Yes. Either
what people's skills are.
Yes, exactly. What even the yarn in the room is a really interesting metaphor for how tangled up these people's lives get in this international intrigue. Yep. The gentleman that the wife is dancing with, who's a government agent of some kind, gets shot while he's on the dance floor.
What did you think of that? How that handled?
I loved it. I loved it.
He just
I don't know who couldn't love it. It's and it's not just this. If it were just that, but it's this thing where this happens again and again throughout the movie. This stiff upper lip Britishness that they approach everything with. I always find that. I mean, I don't find it like, yes, that is very admirable that he died, not screaming, but wondering, what is this? It's more, it's absurd how they react to that. In Bridge on the River Kwai.
Brothers feel to it.
What?
It almost has a Coen brothers feel to it.
It does, moment. But it's very, very British way to go out. Well, a few weeks ago we watched Night Train to Munich, and the main character in that, it personifies this. And we see it later, like I said, in Bridge on the River Kwai, we see it stiff British upper lipism by this British commander played by Alec Guinness in that film, taken to so far an extreme that he actually does damage to everything, to his cause, and and yet there's real precedent for that attitude, what I mean? Like it's not it's a thing we can make fun of, or it's a thing we can amplify, obviously, in films, but it's a thing that's very real. It's the cliche that's born out of a sort of truth about a certain part of the Englishmen and Englishwomen of that era, and even there's still plenty of it today, actually.
Yeah, and here it's used to just to create charm.
Yeah,
and
this doesn't have to be a horror thing, And but if it were just him being a wuss and not wanting to have a horrible assassination moment, I wouldn't like it. There's more meaning in it. The way he reacts to it is classic British special agent. Oh, what does he say? What's this?
He says, I wrote it down here because I just loved it. Oh, look. As blood sort of kind of spread on his chest.
He kind of just slowly collapses down to the floor, and then poof, he's gone.
Yep.
And then people start to panic a little bit. So the big reaction to somebody getting killed in front of your eyes does happen, but it's mostly what? And sometimes stuff is like that. It's what is happening. You don't even know.
Yeah.
And the sequence that follows, which we can't spend too much time on because we really got to get back home and get into the plot proper, but the way the diplomats that are there, the way the investigation kicks off, the way we can talk about how the patriarch of this family gets involved in this. She's handed something by him. How's that work?
He's given a message. He gives her a message, which she gives to her husband to go get the brush that's in her room and get it to the British consulate. I think
a shaving brush.
A shaving brush. Yep. Yeah. So he goes and gets that information. The bad guys realize
he beats them to it, and then but they kind of catch him in the act, and even though they can't do anything about it in the moment, they go ahead and kidnap his daughter as a way to control him throughout the rest of the film.
Yep. And then they're warned not to say anything.
Played by Nova Pilbeam, Joel.
Yeah.
The daughter.
Yep. And the husband is, what's his name again? Gosh. Leslie Banks, who was the secret mole in The Day Went Well, or Went the Day Well, which we've just seen. Yeah. And it made me think of like, oh yeah, he's in another film I'd seen. I looked him up. He's in one called Cottage to Let with Alistair Sim. Then I looked through his filmography. I have 8 films he's in. And he's not really a guy you recognize, is he?
I know his name, Leslie Banks. I mean, he's got a pretty long, storied career. But yeah, I'm not into films of this era, so I'm not surprised to hear that you have 8 of his movies, though, because he's not nobody. and the next big scene, we have a bunch of stuff with the bad guys who are pretty fun in this film. But the next big scene to me is the scene where they come into that meeting with the champagne and they're basically it's an interrogation, but it's this super polite English interrogation. It's hard to even explain what it is.
Yeah.
Because it's all politeness and propriety first and trying to get the information second. And it ends with this it's so polite. It's absurd. That's what I loved about this movie is the way they tiptoe around each other. They don't want to just come right out and ask him what's happening. So they just slowly build up to this question. And finally the question comes at the end. Is it possible, that your daughter has been kidnapped? And there's this stinger in the music that Joel would love. And there's this where he does this huge take, because simply to be asked the thing that the entire scene is about is like so out of character for these upper class people. It's like almost undignified that they're asking him what they need to know from him. But if it's the scene demonstrates that if they don't come right out and ask him, he's never going to answer anything for them. And we don't even see how it ends. Hitchcock doesn't even need to show us how he responds to that. We assume he keeps it to himself still, because that's kind of how the movie plays out. But it's funny that they ask him the big question and the answer isn't important. What's important is that their good manners are getting in the way of anything being done about this.
Yeah.
And his fear for his daughter's sake, which is understandable, is he's just not going to cooperate with them. So you have this two groups of people trying to achieve the same thing. The groups change a little bit throughout the movie, but I think it's funny that it's two groups trying to achieve the same thing that aren't working together at all and keep bumping into each other constantly throughout the film. Like that's super entertaining. And of course the other, it's sort of burying the lead, but what's his face? Who's the actor? The bad guy.
Peter Lorre.
Yeah, Peter Lorre.
Yeah,
because he's so great, and he's really great in this.
Yep.
For a guy who, at this point in his career, barely speaks English, he's creepy and weird. He's all those things that Peter Lorre is. Peter Lorre's something of a cartoon character on screen, but he isn't, though, because he's so chill and natural in his movements and in his, he's always been thus. And that's why I find him so compelling. I might not like him if he weren't that way. And he's so fun and casual, the bad guy in this.
Yeah. He's got this underlying charm and coolness about him that is sort of the template that Hitch is going to use later for like James Mason's character in North by Northwest.
Yeah.
The sophisticated villain.
There's a scene where he comes in, he walks into the room and somebody's holding a gun and he walks up next to him and he kind of looks, and this is good. This is like demo reel stuff for Lorre. He goes, sorry for those in radio land, but I'm going to have to act this up. And he does the whole, like that, like he puts his hands up or whatever. It's hard to explain how kind of just a perfect little silent exchange that it is. But it sums up this guy perfectly in one little silent thing. And by the end of the movie, when everybody's shooting at each other and he's just sort of, he's shooting, he's in a gunfight, he wants to win, but he's also super chill about it and not really panicking. And it just makes for a really odd experience that puts you off. If he were if he were Scarface at the end and he was going crazy, we'd be like, yes, that's what the guys do, but he just isn't. He's kind of like the gun's going off next to him. And again, he kind of looks at the wall like, well, that almost hit me, but it's not. It's all wordless and chill and fun. Is there anything before the big ending? Because we got a bunch more to get through. You want to talk about?
There's again, we have a scene set in a landmark, the Royal Albert Hall.
That's this one.
Assassination attempt is going to take place, and there's a really effective visual trick that Hitch does. The mother is there. She knows something's going to happen, but she doesn't know what. She's been warned to get there, and she's looking around and she's trying to figure out what it is. And you can tell that her anxiety and her panic is just rearing up. And she's watching the conductor, and her focus just sort of goes in and out, and then it becomes completely blurry, and then it melds into almost seamlessly this shot of up in one of the boxes at the theater, a gun coming into frame, because that's where the assassination is coming from. It's just I noticed that, and I was like, that was really effective. It felt seamless. I did not see the cut. And I'm sure if I went back and paused it, I'd
or whatever, you'd find it in there, but that's not necessary. It's compelling. You're not looking for the cut because you're so into what's happening.
Exactly.
And Royal Albert Hall is, it gives a real sense of scale to this thing, because the Switzerland stuff or wherever the movie starts really does feel like fake snow on a soundstage. And, so it's very theatrical. All the car rides are process and just completely fake and artificial. And when you walk into Royal Albert Hall, man, it's a one-of-a-kind place. And it just gives huge scale. There's also a great scene where there's a weird bit of mistaken identity happening with these two guys. I don't remember the context, but they're like up on a railing looking down on something that's taking place, and they're trying to be quiet. And it's like they're adding to the sound like musically or something. I can't remember the deal. Do you remember the scene I'm talking about?
No.
Is it even this movie? I watched all 6 of these in a row.
Sure.
Maybe it's 39 Steps that happens in. Anyway, big shootout at the end. It's a real big, like a gangster movie shootout is what I would compare it to.
What about that fight in the church, though?
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
That.
Before the fight. Before the
gunfight, when he's throwing the chairs. And that was really, really well done, I thought.
That was super fun. And the whole rooftop set and the chase with our chill lead bad guy is sort of hanging out, shooting people. Our kind of evil, definitely more twisted psycho bad guy, sidekick, chases the daughter out up through the roof and up out onto the ledge, and this, it's not a cliffhanger technically, but it's it's genuinely frightening, scene. Yep. And the cops, when they see them together out there, are like, they're scared to do anything about it. But it just so happens that the expert mom skeet shooter is standing next to one of the riflemen, and she takes the rifle from him and shoots the bad guy off the roof. Yep. And our happy family, without ruining the whole movie, which we did, but the happy families reunited at the end. I really think that this movie's plot and its reveals are not special. It really is the how do we get from thing to thing that was neat about it. Yeah. The title is fun. The super almost gooey happy ending. It's so over the top. Yeah. I wish there was more made of her taking the rifle. It felt like Hitchcock knew that we would question whether that could happen.
Yeah.
And
so
just
don't
wanted
give
to get
you time to think about it.
Wanted to do it, but wanted to get it over really fast. And I think he's not giving us enough credit. I think, is this the one that Guillermo del Toro does the video essay about?
Yeah, I think he probably did. I watched it streaming because you had my disc.
Right, I had the disc. Woo! Guillermo basically says everybody wants her to take that gun and shoot the bad guy, and because so he makes excuses for it, but it doesn't need excuses. He's right. Everybody wants that to happen, so he should have made a big deal out of it. It should have been more of a natural thing. The guy shouldn't really wanted to give up the gun. You know what I mean? There should have been more. It could have been a lot more to it, and it would have been a lot more exciting. But it's still fun watching the mom of all people, because it's the mom and not the dad that's the skeet shooting expert. And I like that. I like that she's given that very, very important task that she is uniquely prepared for.
Yep. At
the end of the movie, I think that's very cool.
Yep. Agreed.
Okay.
Let's move on.
Yeah, let's move on to some more steps. We've been talking staircases. Let's move on to the 39 steps. A man in London tries to help a counter-espionage agent. But when the agent is killed and the man stands accused, he must go on the run to save himself and stop a spy ring that is trying to steal top-secret information.
Yeah, so this is based on a famous novel at the time by John Buchan. And this, so Ryan alluded to the fact that Hitchcock remade The Man Who Knew Too Much in the 50s with Jimmy Stewart later. And it's the more well-known film. That was the only official remake he ever made. The 39 Steps, he sort of unofficially remade in America as Saboteur. And you'll see a lot of similarities with it. It's basically very similar plot or whatever. Mm-hmm. The 39 Steps also has a remake in the late 70s, early 80s. David Warner's in it, Robert Paul's in it. And it's a film I love. And I saw early on cable at the time. And I hope I hope this show is a success and we continue doing Hitchcocks, because I think there's a really fun show to do with remakes, sequels of Hitchcock films.
Yeah, and definitely ripoffs.
You hear that, listener? You hear that, listener? It's all on you.
Doing
tell your friends.
Doing the 39 Steps remake. The Lady Vanishes also had a remake around that time with Sybil Shepherd and Elliot Gould. And I
two of the most emotionally available actors that you could get in those days.
I haven't seen it in years, but I own it, and I'll rewatch it when the time comes if we go there. But I remember liking it at the time. So
39 steps.
The 39 steps.
This one was tough for me, although there were things I really, really liked in it. It has a big train sequence. Everything about that was awesome. There were some things I liked, but it started with this, what do you call it? Like a cabaret act or a whatever.
A music hall. Yep,
yeah, the music hall, Mr. Memory stuff. And if it had only been at the beginning of the movie, but unfortunately it's a really important part of all of it. I just thought it was so stupid, and I had a really, really tough time getting over it. But it's just whatever. It's just a launching pad for another Man on the Run story.
Yes.
Which is pretty diverting. I really, really liked his use of the what's it called? The fourth bridge. The bridge between Fifth and Fourth, I think it's called. It's this big iron with these round things that when the train stops on this bridge so that nobody can escape it, our hero manages to escape anyway. And it's not shot with North by Northwest like Ingenuity or anything. I don't want to oversell it, but he takes this thing. It's not the Statue of Liberty by any means, but it's this very interesting architectural thing that exists in real life. It would have been an extremely modern thing at the time. I believe when this was made, it would have been a pretty new bridge with really new style architecture, the arches in particular, and just gets our guy hanging from the beams out on the tracks. And I loved that part of it. I loved some of the countryside scenes, although again, I thought I don't mean to diss on 39 Steps. It was good as the rest of these, but I didn't like the interaction between the country woman and her abusive husband. Like, I thought that was all really grossly caricatured of what those types of people would be.
It is very episodic in nature in that he checks in with various groups and has a little adventure along the way, sort of. I when you're talking about that train scene, I'm wondering if you noticed, because I was really this last time watching it, I was really struck by how effective it was. There's a scene where he changes cars while the train's moving on the outside, and I thought the special effects used in that were just almost seamless. Like, there's rear projection going on, and it's with a regular car there. But it's going around a curve at the time, and it is a process, but it's not. You're looking out the back window of a car, and the picture is only changing slightly as you drive on. This is stuff whipping by and stuff, and it's exciting. There's tons of movement to it. It's blurry. You can't make out the details, so you don't obsess about it. Your eyes stay with the main character as he's moving around. I remember that. That's
I just liked everything about the stuff on the train. I love the stuff in the train station too.
There's another technical shot that I thought was really good. They start inside the car, and you can tell it's rear projection, and then the camera kind of moves around to the back of the car, and then the car moves forward.
Drives away.
We're no longer in a process or in the studio. We're on location, and that transition, you couldn't see where it happened.
No,
go back
it's
and really
neat,
look.
but it calls attention to the artificiality of the thing, which is what I don't like about it. But it is really neat. Like, it's really amazing. You can tell it's like something he wanted to do. Yeah. Oh, you all think we're on a soundstage. Well, take a look at this. where they're not on a soundstage, but they're still in a back lot in a controlled environment of some kind. I don't know exactly how he does it, which is magic, but
Right.
he's still pointing out the artificiality of car scenes, of which these films all have a ton of. And, it's not like they've fixed this exactly. I'm watching films from the 80s and stuff, and the process all looks ridiculous. It always looks ridiculous. It never looks real. It even really good process feels wrong. And so I don't know. I guess he's allowed. It's Hitchcock. He can.
Right.
You can feel his frustration of having to do these scenes this way. So his liberating himself from it is a fun thing. But it's a thing that has nothing to do with the story, really.
Right. Right. But he's keeping himself occupied.
Right. That's good. That's fine. That's
let's
good.
do something fun here. And see how well we can do it. And I think that one, he pulls it off like gangbusters as well.
Yeah, no doubt. That's fun. That's a fun little bit.
And so the 39 Steps is also like the first film where we have a really like concrete example of the MacGuffin, which is the 39 Steps. It's the thing everybody's trying to get and figure out what it is. It doesn't matter.
Right. But, I mean, at least in the case of this film, we do find out the meaning behind it all.
Right.
But even then, it doesn't matter. It's the finding out that's important, not finding out the details that are important.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's never. This might be the movie. Maybe Mission Impossible 3 with the rabbit's foot might be the most MacGuffin-y movie still. But this is either 2 or 3 on the list. Because it absolutely makes no difference. And the weird, convoluted Mr. Memory way we have to get there without just spoiling the details. I don't see the point in doing that. I just feel like I feel like the movie, that's where the movie fails. A MacGuffin is fun, but if the whole ending is the reveal of the thing and you don't really care about it, except that it happens, then that's drawn out, overly complicated and showy and stupid way that they do it is annoying to me.
But the real ending of the film is him being cleared.
True.
Because once again, he's a man being hunted who didn't do anything.
Yeah. I wish, and the woman in this, is this the one? Yeah, this is the one where the woman just keeps. She doesn't fall for him at all. She just keeps betraying him, keeps turning him in. Yep. That's fun. That's different, and it's fun. She hears him, and she even believes him, but she's still she still behaves the way an appropriate English woman would in her day, which is respecting authority, and none of this is my problem. You have to deal with this. Like, she refuses at every step to go on the adventure with him on his terms. She does keep getting drawn into it, but that was really, really neat part of 39 Steps. I've never seen it done quite like that. That was cool.
And I love the location where she changes and comes on board.
Yeah.
That whole they get a room posing as newlyweds. Of course, they're handcuffed
together, right?
Yep. And that's something too that I meant to mention back with the Lodger is people getting handcuffed is sort of
an early motif.
Happens a lot, yeah.
Yeah.
But the innkeepers of this place, I just loved them.
Yeah, they were fun.
Just sweet.
Yeah.
And just gives you that small British, in this case Scottish, because they're running around the Scottish Highlands. But
you get the feeling that Hitchcock knows people like this, and that this is the tribute to them.
Exactly.
It's all completely different than the farm couple, which is this sort of terrible thing.
Yeah,
it's not that terrible. It's that those people don't exist. They don't feel real. They're there to serve a plot-related purpose, and in a sort of nasty way. And these people are there to serve a plot purpose too, but they feel real, so they're worth spending time with, even though their utility in the story is very, very slight.
Yeah. And
I like that. I'm always willing to spend time with cool characters.
Yeah.
And take a little bit of a sidetrack with them. I think that's fun. I think films, suspense films, these are all, other than Lodger, I guess, which is has a lot of weight put on it. And that's Sabotage, our next movie. Actually, that one's very serious. But the rest of these all are very, very light on their feet. So, that stuff is great. That stuff is those are the details that make this stuff enjoyable.
Almost the thriller mixed with almost a romantic comedy. Really starts with the 39 Steps.
But 39 Steps is really, really renowned and really worshipped. And I actually think that the movie that follows the formula, which we're not going to get to yet, but we'll talk about it here, is better in almost every way. And I'll make the case for that when we get there.
All right. Well, let's go into the more serious, the serious realm and go into Sabotage.
Not Saboteur.
Not Saboteur. This is Alfred Hitchcock's.
It also Sabotage starts with a very self-serving, limited definition of the word sabotage.
Yes, yes, it does. But again, isn't that interesting? The way he's disseminating the information he wants you to know.
Right. Except I know English words, and I have a dictionary, and he's like he's not fooling me with that, so it sort of annoys me. I'm like, that's not what sabotage means, but that's not really what it means. That's very limited definition of it. Right. And of course the film follows his limited definition of it. So it's still useful because it tells you this is what we're dealing with. We're not dealing with what it actually means really in the end. We're not. So it's kind of weird to me.
And then we get, example of pure cinema again, where we have the flash or the light bulb and it going out. And then we see the whole city going down or whatever. And
well, and those we haven't been talking about those. But those are in several movies. The city lights, the billboards, you know what I mean. Those feature throughout this series. At least the ones that take place in cities. Sabotage is a very urban film.
Yes.
And Lodger is too. Those were a fun welcome. Like you could feel him getting better at filming that stuff, at what to show you. You know what I mean?
Yep.
I thought it was used very effectively in Lodger, but in Lodger it was repeated, showed it for too long. Like they had all these sort of things where you're like, yes, we know. And in this one, it was all much more suggestive, much more the little ideas get under your skin, like much better handled and very fun visually. I agree.
Joel, did we read the synopsis?
No, we have not. The synopsis for Sabotage is a Scotland Yard undercover detective is on the trail of a saboteur who is part of a plot to set off a bomb in London. But when the detective's cover is blown, the plot begins to unravel.
I really do think there's spoilers in Sabotage we probably shouldn't read.
I know.
Because it's a very, very plot and not a character-dominated film. Not that the characters aren't cool, but this really is twisty, turny surprises, and I think you have to say that Sabotage in this case it isn't sabotage. It's not a train worker, sabotaging a train and killing people because he's upset about the train union rules.
Yeah,
this is a story about a terrorist trying to terrorize people. It's really as simple as that. It should be called terrorism and not sabotage.
Right.
But terrorism, first of all, is a much darker, uglier term, and it doesn't have the ring to it, I think, that Sabotage has. So bombings, man, and bombs going off on purpose and by accident, and when they're intended and when they're not, like, that's a really, really interesting thing. More than one ticking time bomb in this movie, right, Rob?
I'd like to start this discussion with, and I think we're going to need to keep this discussion brief, but Hitchcock had his theory of suspense, the bomb theory, which really briefly is you have two people sitting at a table, they're playing cards, there's a bomb under the table. We know, the audience knows there's a bomb under the table.
Yes.
They don't. You hear them talking about the weather and all this stuff, and you, as the audience member, get out of there. There's a bomb. It's going to go off. It's going to go off.
Right,
and you never let that bomb go off, of course.
Right.
Because
that can't
shock.
be the payoff to the ticking time bomb sequence.
Exactly. In this film, there is a bomb that goes off, and Hitchcock always regretted doing it because it doesn't play with that theory of suspense. It builds the suspense, but then you've got that shock, and he didn't feel that was fair to the audience. And I think that's about all we should say about bombs and
but it's
stuff.
At the same time, while
it's effectively done.
It is really effectively done, and it's the first domino of a very fast-paced and extremely exciting, like multiple leveled cat and mouse ending to the film. And that's what's great about the film. And I don't know how you lift his breaking of his own rule out of this film and not have it be effective anymore. I think that's tough. So I feel like it almost has to be there. The very famous, I can't remember what they call it, the book interviews with Francois Truffaut, where
Truffaut Hitchcock, Yep.
Part of that, they discussed this exact thing that we're talking about. And again, you've done a elegant job of not spoiling it, so I won't either. Truffaut does when he judges the sequence. He kind of comes out and says what he doesn't like about it, and Hitchcock, because he loves Truffaut, sort of sits there and agrees with him. But he also says, but that's not really the reason I regret it. The reason I regret it is because it breaks this rule of mine that I feel pretty strongly about, that if it's not that a bomb can't go off, and it's not that a bomb can't, kill a beloved character or whatever. It's that if you're going to do that, it should be a surprise. If you're going to build the suspense up, it really can't end with the obvious thing happening at the end, or you're wasting elements and you're not really playing fair with the audience. And I thought that the rule of the bomb, we're not talking about it today, but we all watched it. I believe the three of us in the same film class, we all watched the beginning of, Rob, you've probably seen it since you were watching ancient movies when you were 11, but the rest of us were getting exposed to some of this for the first time. But the long uninterrupted opening of Rope is very famous.
Oh yeah.
Bomb rule sequence, maybe not the most famous Hitchcock movie.
Oh, you're
maybe
thinking
the most famous.
of Touch of Evil.
Oh, maybe.
Yeah, the Orson Welles
Touch
film.
of Evil, the Orson Welles. Yeah.
Yep. Oh yeah, and we got to dig into Welles at some point because
we'll see.
That's a great.
God, there's Marvel, and there's MCU movies to watch too. Rob, Jesus.
Right. Yeah.
That's true. And all the Transformer films. You got to get
correct.
Those in.
Exactly. Those are still waiting for us. Sabotage is interesting. It's my least favorite of these, but it was tight and perfect in a way that some of these aren't. I did appreciate, you know what I mean? If you're going to bring people down by terrorist bombings, I did appreciate that there weren't any cheesy, corny characters or weird little sidetracks. And you know what I mean? I don't think that would have been I don't think I would have liked that in a film. I don't think I want the pressure taken off of me in a film that's about this sort of subject matter. So I get why there's regrets in this film, but at the same time, I'm like, it kind of has to be the way it is.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's move on then, so we don't accidentally spoil anything, because really, I've been missing Nova Pilbeam.
Me too.
I say we go back, have a little, get another Nova Pilbeam fix in a movie called Young and Innocent.
Or in America, it was called The Girl Was Young.
Yeah. Yep.
The more salacious, less metaphorical title, The Girl Was Young. Read the synopsis, and then I'll tell you why Young and Innocent is not just such a better title than The Girl Was Young, but why it's actually a great title.
A man on the run from a murder charge enlists a beautiful stranger who must put herself at risk for his cause.
Young and innocent. The girl is the young and the guy is the innocent, and they come together over this crazy shared experience. And I believe we'll talk about the bit of the details, but I believe in a really natural, charming, and wonderful way. This movie, which I really don't, I mean, when I look into Hitchcock, and maybe I'm just wrong about this, but when I look into him, this movie's not really discussed much at all. As a matter of fact, I think if if somebody other than Rob had picked 6 movies for us from this era, we would have gotten Murder, or we would have gotten The Secret Agent, or we would have gotten what was the one you just talked about? Anyway,
Rope.
No, not Rope. That comes later.
Yeah,
but
I was going to say.
But no, we talked about it back. He did a whole sidetrack on it. I don't remember what it's called.
Oh, Blackmail.
Yeah, Blackmail. Thanks. I just think this one would be left out, and I think it's a shame because this film, this film's delightfully entertaining. Yeah. As a suspense film, okay, it's light entertainment, but and it starts out with one of the worst scenes in any of these 6 movies. So I really felt like, oh my God, here we go. This is going to be terrible. But but I was completely, I guess I'm a big wuss. I was completely seduced by the romance in this. And the romance in the middle section of this film in no way prepared me for the innovative skill with which the end of the movie is shot. And even though the end of the movie is sort of it's a cop-out as far as storytelling goes, but to say why I think that, I guess I'd have to spoil it. Mm-hmm. But I love Nova Pill being in this. I thought she was fantastic. And I thought that the wrongly accused gentleman on the run, played by who, Joel?
Derek DeMarnay?
Yeah, it's something weird.
It was great. I mean, I just believed those guys completely. And I loved that even though the girl was young, that she's not silly, you know, she really isn't. So this situation and this guy get the best of her, but he's not like trying to trick her or trying to seduce her. He plays it straight with her the whole time. It's something when you go all the way back to Lodger. The cop in Lodger is a very charming, sweet guy, the kind of guy you bring home to mom and dad, the kind of guy you should want to end up with. He is not honest with the heroine of that film. He misleads her. He, without trying, he condescends to her by not including her in his thoughts and feelings. This dude is completely the opposite, and you get totally why they would come together as a crew, and even why they need each other. And that's what I loved about it. But I guess it starts with a non sequitur of a scene that becomes important.
Yeah.
And it starts with a body washing up on the beach, right? Am I remembering that right? That's really the inciting incident.
It starts before that. It starts sort of in the middle of an argument between a husband and a wife. Yeah. And, you know, it's an example in that scene of Hitchcock doing it Hitchcock's way. This is a standard scene. You've got a husband and wife arguing or whatever, and he could just shoot it as such and write the dialogue as such. But there's a moment where, you know, his wife has obviously been running around and she wants a divorce and he won't give it to her. And he says, "You're such a," and she goes, say it. And there's a big thunderclap as he mouths something.
Yeah,
because he can't say that out loud.
I thought the scene was effing terrible. I really thought it was bad and really thought the movie was going to suck. I get it, though.
And then after that, you know...
let me just say, I was so glad the movie wasn't about these two people. That's all I had. And relieved.
He goes out after the argument, and there's a close-up on his face, and he's doing this twitch thing. So he's got this nervous twitch that's established, and that would be important later in the film. And otherwise, we're done with these characters for quite a while till the end of the film.
Right.
But we'll learn that that's the wife is the body that washes up.
Washes up on the beach. They live in this very cool, overlooking the ocean sort of. Very Rebecca-esque, dare I say, location.
I was so glad to hear you say what you said at the top of this film, because that's exactly how I feel. This is one of the most underrated Hitchcock films of all time. It's not his greatest film. It's not one of his greatest films, but it's the one nobody talks about, and there's no good reason for that. It's
because it's as good as any of these,
films that we do talk about more regularly. And you're exactly right. You ask anybody else to pick out 6 films to talk about from the British period, Young and Innocent probably isn't on that list, and it should be, I think. I enjoyed this film immensely, and I came to it rather late in life because it wasn't available really anywhere.
Right. Not a classic, so it was one of the ones that rolled out slower.
Exactly. And boy, yeah, I think it's fantastic, and I agree. The leads, their relationship, and the way it develops and grows. And
the father and the other cops. It's really everybody, the townspeople in the pub. It's neat. It's a living, breathing community. You know, that when they're pulling up and the guys with the sheep and everything, it's like all of it is. It's just hard to explain, but it doesn't feel like you're on a set anymore. It feels like you're in a barn. You're probably not. The barn probably is a set, but he does this really good job of putting us in this place. He's very clever, although perhaps not clever if you really think about it, of trapping this dude on the run in this region. Because you really should just be able to get out of Dodge, and you don't feel like that the local constable or the deputies or anything are really going to be able to chase after him very effectively. Right.
But he's got to prove his innocence.
Right.
Because again, we have the innocent man wrongly accused.
Yeah. Yeah. If it were me, I'd just be like, I'm getting out of here. They can think whatever they want. But and of course, without knowing it, and this is another credit to it, with this, because this relationship, I mean, we know who the leading woman is, and we know who the leading guy is. So, and we know there's a good chance they'll get together, if not physically, probably in a film of this era, at least emotionally, they're going to be connected to one another.
Yeah.
But it just happens so naturally, and he really does end up with, when we meet him compared to when he actually manages in the most exciting way, at least in this group of films, manages to prove his innocence. It's fantastic. I loved the sneaking around in the barn scene. I loved all the low angle shots from that. I mean, I love that that's a location we return to a couple of times. It's not just there for a stunt scene.
Yeah.
It's established, and then we get it. The tracking shot through the theater where the symphony is playing is breathtaking. I mean, it's simple. It's not one of his, but it's really amazing, and it sets up the reveals that come at the end. I won't say specifically what they are, but they do involve twitching, as Rob alluded. Yeah. We didn't see that for no reason. We stop, pause, and labor on it, so it is going to come up later. It's again, and Hitchcock knows this. It's in the rule of the bomb. It's in the other things. It's the setup is everything. The setup is everything, and if you do that right, then the payoff, even if it's silly or whatever, even if it's a MacGuffin, it works. And compared to 39 Steps, which I also liked, I just felt like it worked like a charm in this movie.
Yeah,
I really, really liked it.
A couple other sequences that I really like. I wonder what you think of when they drive the car into the old mine.
Yeah. I love stuff like that.
Yeah, I did too. It's just.
I mean, I love stuff like that in any movie, and it's great in this. All the stuff. I mean, all the trials of the car, the getting the gas for the car, and you know what I mean. Like all of that is super fun. The way Nova drives the thing, like she's clearly driving it out in the country. There's still some process when they're driving at night or whatever, but but she's driving that car around in the countryside. You can see, because he makes a point of showing you that that's happening. Yeah. She must have sat with a driver and really learned how to do that, I would think, because that, not so much because she couldn't drive, but that car, she may not have been able to drive, I don't know, back in the 30s. And that car is more antiquated than that even. There weren't easy to handle, those roadsters with the big long fronts where the little wheels turned like bicycle wheels up the front. They're not easy to handle. That car in Captain America, First Avenger, that's an impossible car. You could not drive that car, period. It wouldn't do anything that you wanted it to do. It looks cool, but and this car is just an almost impossible car, but I'm impressed that the actor was driving it. The dog's adorable. Dogs are always great.
Yeah. The other thing I really kind of liked in this, and it's not usually in all of these early films, and there's some of this in The Lady Vanishes too, his miniature work. It's miniature work.
Yeah.
And we saw it in Night Train in Munich too. Mm-hmm. But it's so neat.
Yeah, I agree.
It's just like really neat, and there's a couple moments where you go, God, if you hadn't had the guy raise his hand or something like that shot would have worked even, I might not have even been totally sure it was a miniature because they're so well done. But a lot of fun miniature work in several of these early British ones.
And that mine sequence, just to get back to that is worthy of a big ending of any of these movies. And it isn't. It's the end of the second act is all it is. Yep. And it's fantastic. I loved it. Yeah. The DVD version and my DVD player didn't get along, and after that sequence, every time it would jump back to the start of the movie and start playing it like you don't need to see anything more. The mine sequences.
You know what? We're done here. We're done.
If you want to watch it again, you are allowed to watch from the beginning through the end of the mine sequence, but you don't need to see the end of this one. You know how it's going to turn out.
In full, right?
Yeah, I did eventually. Okay. But in the next day, like in pieces, basically. So, and I was worried it was my fault although I don't see how it could have been, I was worried it was my fault that DVD wasn't working. So the Blu-ray that you gave me ages ago, I gave back to you in the pile, so just in case, so that hell or high water, you've got a version of Young and Innocent in your collection.
Okay, cool.
And if you don't need one, you can always give one back to me and I'll take it. Because I was very taken with it. I really loved it. I had a really great time watching that one.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. The Lady Vanishes.
The Lady Vanishes. Let's move on. This one is 1938. This is the beautiful Margaret Lockwood. Boy, is she pretty. While traveling in continental Europe, a rich young playgirl realizes that an elderly lady seems to have disappeared from the train.
Where'd she go?
Yeah. Where'd she go? And why what the?
And why does she care so much?
And why does she care so much? Yeah.
She, to her credit, her force of will, she makes us care, Mm-hmm. And that's, of course, although this film gets too complicated for its own good, in my opinion, that simple premise in the whole middle of the film is fantastic. I mean, just that idea that this, poof, somebody's gone and somebody becomes obsessed about it, has to figure it out. Even though the explanation is sort of disappointing, Rob, I have to say. By then, people are shooting at us and it's off to the races in terms of excitement and conventional thrills, so whatever. This otherwise was a fantastic movie. Our buddies are back. Our buddies from Night Train to Munich.
This is their first appearance. And like I think we said at the time, I think they appeared as those characters in 6 films. This was
more than that on radio programs and all this stuff, But 6 films, only 3 of which they have the same names, but they are winkingly the same characters.
Charters and Caldecott.
This is a fantastic dialogue scene of just about cricket, which is super fun. It is very appropriate that their introduction to us, not perhaps us as an audience in this group, but us, the wider audience who saw these guys for the first time in this movie, that all they're talking about is cricket.
Yep.
It's so fun, and there's such a couple of funny British characters. I just love them. I think still my favorite thing is what's his face trying to buy the magazine in Hitler's Germany. The comic magazine. I can't remember what it's actually called. And he asked for it, and the German newsstand lady. This is Night Train to Munich. Sorry, guys, I'm talking about a totally different movie.
Yeah.
But we didn't talk about this back then, so I'm talking about it now. And he's like, well, see if they have a copy of whatever. And he asked this old grumpy German lady, and she's like, no, we have this and this. We have state-sponsored this, and we got this.
Right.
And he's like, he says they don't have it. And he's like, sold out, presumably. Just that's a good introduction to who these guys are. They're so clueless, and yet they're not stupid.
Right.
They're single-minded in the wrong way all the time, and that they'd be intolerable if they were clowns or buffoons. They're not. You really buy into who they are, and they are a huge asset to this film.
Yep, and they do step up, just like in Night Train to Munich, when they finally
when the chips are down.
This is important. Let's dig in and do our part.
Yep. So I love that about it. I just felt like, I know there's like a big shootout at the end of this movie too. I couldn't quite figure out why that was happening exactly. I mean, I kind of know why, but I just kind of like the pieces of this one don't fit together really, really nicely. The part I was most excited about was the woman saying she saw somebody who vanished, nobody else being able to relate to that, or even if there's a hint that they don't seem to care, and they don't really know why she cares. This is a thing that's been carried on into future films, and it's, I love it. I mean, I love it. And Margaret Lockwood's fantastic. She's the perfect woman to be at the center of this.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think Michael Redgrave's also fantastic, well cast in this.
Mm-hmm, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, he's really a lot of fun. Sort of as this, as a cad, cad with a heart of gold.
Yeah. A cad who's more than he seems at first.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, this movie.
So Night Train to Munich, which came later, but they're very similar in tone and in the relationships. They share this set of actors. They both have really. The Lady Vanishes really is almost 100% Train movie.
Yeah.
Whereas Night Train.
Yeah. It takes 30 minutes to get to the train, though.
Yeah, true. But that's it.
Yeah, the whole the opening 30 minutes is. Yeah, I mean, we're establishing these characters. We're establishing some relationships and stuff, but and I'm like, what is happening with this thing? Why? What is going on? And then you get the singer outside.
Yeah.
And his ending to that, like, that's how the whole hotel section ends. Is with the well, I guess we'll just say the singer stopping his song.
Yeah, sure.
It's just like, what is happening? And then she gets hit on the head by falling rock, I guess, from a crumbling.
No, it was a murder attempt on Miss Foy. Somebody pushed a plant from up above. And yep, she gets Margaret Lockwood.
Not a random event, but
no. Yeah, which is also hilarious that if it would have succeeded,
a really inefficient and not odds in your favor way of attempting to kill someone.
Right.
I love the idea that they had this whole that there was this whole conspiracy planned on the train, and then someone went, well, why don't we just try to push something off and try to knock her on the head? Hey, that's a really good idea. Let's give that a go. But we'll keep this really convoluted thing as a backup.
Yeah.
Well, maybe the convoluted plan on the train was put in motion very quickly when that didn't work.
That's impressive.
Because they had a radio head, a patient came on so they could make a swap. Everybody who was in on the conspiracy wasn't necessarily in it to begin with. They were just instructed later because of power that was held over them. I don't know.
It's complicated, it doesn't pay off in a very cool way. Like I say, the thing that's great about this is the very cool central characters and the movie works best when you don't know what the hell is going on, to use Joel's term. Yeah. And that's something that I think as modern audiences, not to be too hard on us, but I think we're so used to being looked out for and have all of our questions answered even if they don't need answers. And definitely all of the films that have come out that have all these reworked and re-edited beginnings so that we know what's happening as soon as possible. And this film, you don't really know. And then even when it's over, you kind of know, but you don't. You're like, ugh. You try to connect the dots. It's a bit of a trick. It's still, we're not giving it enough credit for what it is, which it's just absurdly from scene to scene. It's just really, really sharply written, well acted, dynamically shot, and a just super entertaining film. Yeah. So it is all it's cracked up to be. It's The Lady Vanishes, to me, is a very famous title, right? It is great. I admit I had checked out. By the time the gunfight starts, I had sort of checked out. I've been like, this isn't where I expected this for us to be at this point. And I expected like somebody running around on the roof of the train and somebody hanging off the back of it or something like more like that. Mm-hmm. And what we got was this other thing, and I just, but it doesn't matter. Lady Vanishes was a blast. You could tell it was a culmination of sorts. Yeah. To this group of films in terms of technique and just in terms of pure sort of audience pleasing stuff. And I liked it for that reason. So, but it is like, if it doesn't sound like we're hitting the highlights from a plot standpoint, it's because you don't want to ruin everything, and B, you to get into any of it is to have to get into all of it. Yeah. It's kind of, I think that's fair to say.
Yep.
Yeah. The big question of it is, why does she care? Why does Iris care so much that she's, and then there's the great moment when she's like, you know what, I'm wrong. I guess I am wrong.
There's a moment like that in all of these where the person just gets browbeaten into into believing the falsehood eventually before some other realization or some other light bulb goes off. Yeah, I agree with that. But I don't, why are she's so upset? I get it. Your obsession happens when you least expect it sometimes. And sometimes you just can't let go of something. I thought that was, again, it's a credit to the actor because it's a tricky thing to play without being overbearing and annoying. Mm-hmm. But that's the probably story in the book, really.
Maybe you bring up a good point. The fact that Caldecott and Charters are two are two hilarious cricket loving fellows. Mm-hmm. It's like they're always like right at the right moment. They're always there to sort of like, oh, there she goes. She's off her boil again. Right, Like the fact that they kind of call attention to it in such a dismissive manner. Mm-hmm. A lot, it's sort of like, no, guys, she's right. You kind of helps keep you on her side when she's, getting, I don't want to say hysterical, but when she's really getting heated about where's Mrs. Freud, where's Miss Freud
hysterical anymore.
Yeah, but where's when she's like, no, you got to believe me, and it's these two really droll, they just dry as a bone British dudes. Like, when they come to the look that these two dudes give them when they come down in the hotel in their tuxedos to eat. Yeah. The two dudes who just give them the look like, dude,
where do you think you are?
Yeah, I'm like, that to me was, again, that was sort of like, oh, it gave me permission. And in fact, it was one of those things where it's like you think of Hitchcock and suspense and everything, and you forget just how funny Hitchcock can be. And there's lots of wonderful humor.
It really, in all but a couple of these are all movies that are full of funny stuff. Yeah, where he really does have it all. It can be funny. It can be suspenseful. It can be, it can be everything. That can all be in one movie. And I don't think, those tonal shifts, they're difficult. It takes a master to pull them off, even in a pedestrian story. Mm-hmm. Lady Vanishes is fun. It's a tricky story. There's a lot you got to pull off to make it work, actually. But the biggest thing is recognizing her obsession with this situation but also being able to see it from the outside as a comic and fun thing.
Yeah.
But I think it's human nature. If we do get stuck on something, the more people tell us we're crazy, the more we sort of insist we're not. You really do. People dig their feet in, and I think plays all very naturally in the plot of this, and
that's the conversation I get all the time when people ask me why I'm still doing this show. Like, you must be and I'm like, no, we're gonna, so I dig in, and I'm like, no, we're like, you must be crazy to continue to do this show.
So Joel, what did you think of the end when the train car is stuck in the woods and they're having to shoot it out and trying to figure out how to get out of that situation?
Okay, so I was with the film. I was with it at that point, and I just felt like the shootout went on too long.
There's a lot of scene work happening during it, though, to be fair. But
I get all that, and then to have all of this happen, and then the subject of the shooting, the main reason for this shootout to go by, I'm gonna sneak out the back, and they're like, but you're gonna, and which also her running away from the train. And, kind of almost serpentining while she's running brought me a lot of joy.
I love that shot in particular. And did she make it?
Oh, yeah. Did she make it? Yeah, that is a great shot. When she gets down just over the little ridge.
Yeah.
I mean, it was good. There's a lot going on. The dude who's just like, you all are fools. Right. I'm gonna do the sensible thing and give up. It was just like, what is that? And it was like, was that his whole purpose? Was to lead up to that moment?
His whole purpose was to be one more naysayer. Like, no, there was no woman here. And all the reasons why that could continue to be plausible.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone but the audience.
Yeah, I mean, it was fine. But like where Ryan said he was sort of like kind of checking out a little bit at that point. I was like, nope, I'm in, I'm all in. Go. Sure, you're gonna have a shootout with, you're gonna have an either a 6-shot or an 8-shot pistol that's gonna fire like 22 times. Right. I'm here for it. Go, bring it on. The dude who got knocked out. Oh, this actually made me happy when the cop who they knocked out actually woke back up.
Yeah.
And I'm like, cool. Wow, that almost never happens. Once you're knocked out, you're conveniently knocked out for the duration of the scene. Mm-hmm. So him waking back up, I was all for that. Okay.
I become curious because, like, when Ryan says what he did, it's like, I've lived with these films for 40 years. I can't see them with fresh eyes.
Yeah.
It's hard for me to see like what works and what doesn't with films I've seen a dozen times or more. They're just so ingrained, and I fell in love with them and memorized them at such a young age. I'd probably seen The Lay Vanishes, 4 or 5 times by the time I was 15. It's ingrained in your brain, and you don't see some things sometimes.
Well, and I really do take for granted this older era. Like there really are some things. I don't know in each of these, and I'm not necessarily sure where there are. There are a few things I was aware of, but there really are things that audiences were experiencing to some degree for the first time. There are techniques in storytelling going on by this filmmaker in the 30s, before the war, with that were so fresh and so the style of storytelling was just sweeping people away. And some of that you still notice because some of it is just so bracingly original, but some of it became the language of film.
Right.
And you watch a movie from 1937 and in 2022, and you may be aware how well. I mean, I don't think you know what I mean? What was artificial? What wasn't? This or that? The miniatures, the mine, whatever. The train. I mean, you don't appreciate how much this set the stage, not just for future Hitchcock cinema, but just future cinema. The masters of this era were creating the way you did stuff.
They're creating that language. They're having, what you think of as trope now. These were original thoughts at this time,
Right.
and that I always try to keep that in mind too. Rob, I know that you said it's you can't look at these with fresh eyes. If I may, I would like to suggest to you going back, listening to the show 2 episodes ago, and you probably could go see Chew in Blade Runner, and he'll give you a set of fresh eyes to see these things. So
go to the iWorks.
Go to the iWorks.
Get yourself set up.
All right, everybody. So those are 6 of Alfred Hitchcock's early, not early, but these are his British period. And, that's just our discussion. I hope you really, really liked it. Hope you got, gonna go check out some of these films. They're really, really super fun.
Yeah. Let the guys know if you want more.
Yep. Go ahead. You need to tell us. And do you have thoughts on Hitchcock? Do you have favorite?
I think
Hitchcock
it's really
moments?
a matter of you need to tell us if you don't want any more, because the chances that we're going to do the next set of Hitchcock films but it's sometime in the new year is very high right now. So
that's true.
It's more that you need to put an ixnay on the Hitchcock hay than to praise us. Although certainly then that is welcome at any time.
Don't tell Dunkelberger it was me. And then I just imagine Rob eventually I don't know, going to whomever it was that and gives them the kiss of death and goes, I know it was you.
Yeah.
I know it was you that killed the future Hitchcock shows. But that's
upcoming shows.
Yeah.
Dr. Andrew Mazzy's going to come on the show and talk about the lesser disaster movies of the 70s. Andrew, when he was on our show, on our dad's movie show, was all like, I could do this. We could talk about this. We're like, dude, do you even listen to the show? We talked about all these already. And he's like, well, we could do the modern ones then. No, talked about those, bro. Yeah. It was watching because his enthusiasm for movies is infectious and completely without snobbery. And I love that about him and his, he wants to talk about stuff. So I went back and I was like, well, let's see what we can scoop up out of the bottom of the monkey barrel. And there was some stuff there still to talk about. So that's coming up.
Cool.
Supposed to be our next show, but our schedules are a little goofy. So bear with us a little bit, but that is coming up soon.
It's coming up soon.
Yeah. His wife, the one and only Dana Del Val, who has been on the show a couple of times, and most notably for our Jane Austen episode, has agreed in principle to do an Elizabeth Gaskell show. I'll tell you those right now because they're long. They're mini-series. They're all mini-series. So if you want to watch those along with us before Christmas, they are thus. They are Wives and Daughters. These are all of recent vintage. Many of these have been adapted many times throughout the years in different BBC and Masterpiece Theater settings. These are all the ones of the aughts and forward-ish, maybe late 90s in there too. But Wives and Daughters, North and South, Cranford, and Return to Cranford. Those are going to be the Elizabeth Gaskell miniseries we're talking about. They're all delightful if you love period dramas. And Hollywood has not been doing right by us in a period drama way lately. They've been screwing the pooch big time. So we got that coming, right? We got a double feature episode again where we'll have Rob back and Michael back. That's always fun. For some variation on Halloween movies. That'll be late in October. Joel will be relieved to hear I am not watching 62 Halloween movies this year. I'm only watching 30-ish. So we'll have
That
that the
is-
day before
that-
Halloween. Plenty of time
that-
for you to catch all 30 movies before the trick-or-treat
Yes,
starts.
that is in no way excessive.
Well, it's less. It's a lot less than the last 2 years.
It
is all I'm
is.
saying.
Will be. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Maybe in one show.
that number may evolve. It's still a while to Halloween, but I think I'm gonna stick to about that many. Some very recent and relatively recent Halloween movies. No Scream won't be in there. No Halloween Kills won't be there. There will be no Nightmare on Elm Street remakes, reboots whatsoever. There will be no Fear Street. There will be no R.L. Stine. If this is the kind of stuff you like, take a hike. But I will be reviewing as many interesting horror movies as I can. Some of them, rest assured, will be super crappy. I promise. I mean, that's just math.
Mm-hmm. That is the movie show promise.
Yep. And sometime before the end of the year, I don't know when, I don't know what. It's Movie Club, baby. It's back.
Movie Club will be back, and we'll do a Christmas movie club.
We've missed Movie Club and our buddy Shauna so much, and she's going to come back and do a show with us. So that's happening. And anything else that I'm forgetting, Joel? Carol Ballard, William Hurt. The countdowns of the works of these people are coming. Who's the other actor that James Caan, maybe. James Caan, unfortunately, unlike William Hurt, James Caan requires me to watch about 4 or 5 things, which is hard to get that on my schedule with all these shows. Mm-hmm. But we do want to honor him, and there are some very fun unwatched films on his filmography that I only get to watch. So. And Rob will have ideas. He always does.
Yep.
Thanks for this one, man. It's, I'd only seen 2 Hitchcock films. Now I've seen 8. And by the next time we do this, you know what I mean? I'll have seen 14. It's just going to keep getting more and more. And they've been great so far. And I don't think these are necessarily the best ones. I think it's going to be really, really fun going through these with you. So this is sort of film school with Rob, but we're starting off. And I think rightly so, and I think conveniently so, because there's so many great ones. We're starting off with Hitchcock, and it's all fresh eyes for me. So that's an exciting idea.
That's exciting for me too.
Yeah.
I love sharing something that people then find.
I've had it sitting on the shelf over here for ages. Mm-hmm. Most of these, most from Rebecca to his death. Not all, but just most of them. The majority of the films of that era. Right. It's hard. It's like when you start buying Frank Zappa albums for the first time. It's like, what do you listen to? There's 900 albums.
Right.
And you feel overwhelmed by it. And as a result, they just sort of sit. And you have them, and you're proud of it. People walk through the room, and they're like, oh, you're a Hitchcock fan. And you're like, yeah, sure. I guess I am.
I'm a Hitchcock owner.
Yeah.
By the time it's over, we might be able to say that legitimately and with some authority, and that's neat. So thanks for coming on. Yeah. Thanks for this curated early Hitchcock films, especially this era. We needed this. So thank you.
Yep. All right. You can reach out to us at The Movie Show with Joel and Ryan on Facebook, on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter at Ask Joel and Ryan. Ask Joel and Ryan at gmail.com. And, of course, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can like and subscribe, and you can reach us here, too, and we will get back to you. So thank you all very much. As Rob says, sharing is caring, and that is the Hitchcock way. Take care, everybody.
Thank you for listening to The Movie Show with Joel and Ryan. Remember, all views and opinions represented in this podcast are personal and belong solely to the speaker and do not represent those people, institutions, or organizations that the speaker may or may not be associated with, unless explicitly stated. None of these views and opinions were intended to malign or deceive. And now, here's the producers, circa 1982, to play us out.